every member of her team became pregnant and left. And so she went from having 6 hairdressers to having just her. Not all your clients are going to want to go to a home salon.
Unless we create good career pathways and we really tap into the talent that we're trying to employ, we lose people too quickly. Nobody wants to work in my team and my salon anymore. It feels like everybody's going solo. I'm losing my team. It feels more and more like people are leaving to go solo. Do you agree? And why wouldn't they? They get to make their own hours. You can pay yourself whatever you want. You can work out of your own home. Sounds pretty cool, eh? No, wrong. The grass isn't always greener on the other side of your salon. Even though sometimes they leave and they come back, there are a few things that you can do as a boss to help them stay in your salon in the first place. So I have brought back some good friends of mine, James and Lyndon from the Vivo group. They have about 80 or 90 salons throughout New Zealand, and they're going to share their thoughts on solo salons and what you can do to prevent your team from making the solo shift. So here in this episode, the rise and fall of the solo salon. But really quick, before we start, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Shortcuts, your leading salon software provider. Shortcuts have 3 magic numbers to boost your revenue, which I'll be sharing later in this episode. James, Lyndon, welcome back to the Salon Owners Collective podcast. Really pleased to have you both on the podcast again.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Great to be here.
For many of you listening, you will know James and Lyndon, been here 3 or 4 times now. But for those who haven't met this dynamic duo, do you want to just kind of say, who are you? Where are you from? How did you get to be doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm Lyndon Mason. This is James Carlisle. We're the co-founders of Vivo Hair Salons. So we bought our first hair salon about 13 years ago in Auckland, and we've been building our group ever since. So we currently have over 80 salons from Whangarei to Invercargill in New Zealand.
And you have a bit of a background of growing groups of multi-location sites. Tell us a little bit about what's the background. What were you doing prior to owning salons?
Before we did hair salons, we did optometry practices. So we did a similar thing. We bought a bunch of independent optometry practices and put them together under the same brand. So that was quite successful for us. We sold that group to OPSM in 2010, and then we went into the hairdressing business.
I love that. Tell me a little bit about your experience over the last 13 years, did you say, to building from, one location to now over 80 locations. That's quite a large amount of growth in 13 years, if you think about it.
Yeah,
it's been a busy 13 years and a lot of lessons learned along the way. So the way that we operate now is very different than we did 13 years ago, and I think that's been a really key part of our success, is that we've always, as we buy salons and grown our group, learned from the people that we've brought in terms of what's best practice, how do we do things better, and we're always looking for the new way of doing things. We never like to have the idea that the way we're doing it currently is the only way, and so it's all been about I guess synthesizing and bringing the best of the people that we have on board and trying to share that amongst the team.
Yeah. What have been some of the
interesting? I was just thinking, one thing that's changed is that when we started this business 13 years ago or 14 years ago, there were some people that came into the business who were really fantastic, lots of experience, and contributed massively to the Vivo that we have today. And I guess back then they were already maybe in their 50s or later, and 14 years later they're retiring, and they get into the age that it's like time for them to move on, and I look back 13, 14 years ago and they seemed quite young, but But now they want to retire to the beach, and that's been quite a shock to me, actually. This year there's been a few that have put their hands up and said, they've loved the journey, but it's time for them to retire.
Yeah.
And we're like,
Yeah.
no, don't.
Yeah.
You're still young. Give us another 10
Yeah.
years.
That's incredibly sad.
Especially this is the thing in business ownership, especially as you start to become a mature business. You come out of the startup phase and you well into being a mature business, is that as you start to get change, or especially in leadership roles, or people that have a lot of internal knowledge about what you do and how you got to be doing the things that you're doing and why you have best practice, like it's a huge loss to lose those people, because you have all of that depth of knowledge, and to have to retrain that to new up and coming people, or like it's a journey, isn't it, as a business owner? Like that cycle is quite it's something that needs to be overcome.
Yeah, well, I guess it starts with just the acceptance that it is just part of doing business, is that that cycle is never going to end. People are always going to move on or move up or move out in their own kind of life journey. And so you have to be willing to constantly be upskilling those who are coming through, and giving them those pathways and that knowledge so you don't lose it. And obviously it makes a big impact to the culture when you lose someone who's an iconic figure that everybody knows. And it's about how do you do that in a way that shows them the respect that they deserve, but also gives other people opportunities coming through.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of people sort of moving on and moving through, one thing that is prevalent now, I think, doesn't matter what part of the world, is this increased um, trend of people moving away from the salon environment and into a solo entrepreneurial moment, whether it's in a suite or working from home. Is this something that you too have noticed that's happening in the industry?
Yeah, so we are actively on lots of different forums, and obviously talk to a lot of salons and our own team as well. And absolutely, this is something that I think has always been there in the industry, but COVID has really, it feels like since COVID that's really accelerated, and there's definitely, as you said, been a movement towards people wanting to go solo for. And everyone has their own reasons for wanting to do that, but it's definitely a trend that we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, we've definitely seen it. I think we've more sort of seen it, as Linda said, in the forums, and from anecdotally from what we hear, we haven't really seen a huge increase in our own staff going into home salons. There's always been a few, there'll always be a handful here and there. So it's and we're still seeing that, but we haven't seen a massive increase, and I think partly because at Vivo, we invest so much in marketing and in that pipeline of new clients, that I think there's an awareness that you just don't get that in a home salon. That that pipeline of new clients that is always coming through our doors. It's obvious. It's just obvious to everyone that you wouldn't get that. So it's there, and we're aware of it, and certainly the few people in our team that have left to go and work from home, I guess the impression we get is that a lot of it is, maybe it's the cost of living. It's the idea that they might be able to earn more money, have more discretionary money. I don't think those sums ever work out, but to them it does, and there are real concerns over that. It's very short-term thinking. When we first got into this business, one business that we bought was a very successful hair salon, and it had 6 established, experienced hairdressers, and the owner of that salon had a bad run where every member of her team became pregnant and left, and so she went from having 6 hairdressers to having just her, and so that very successful business suddenly, almost within the space of a few months, it just wasn't successful anymore. She had no team, and that was very hard for her, and I think that's an illustration of just how tough it can be in business. You can't ever take anything for granted, things can change very quickly. But anyway, we bought that salon, and over time, a number of those stylists came back, and we recruited, more people in there. And in a roundabout way, I'm kind of getting to the point. There was a stylist who we employed, a very good stylist, but she had a home salon, and she had not paid her taxes, and she had been made bankrupt by the IRD, and they had put they had judgments in place that meant a big part of her pay packet every week we had to deduct and send to the IRD. And so she had money problems. The whole time she worked for us, she had money problems, and it was because she was just paying back this huge debt. And I feel like in her case, it's something that's always stuck with me, because she never actually recovered from that. Her life was very tough because of it, and it was a classic example of how it might seem like the grass is greener, but you still actually have to follow the rules. You actually do need to run a proper business if you're running a home salon. You need to pay your taxes, because if you don't, the consequences are severe and ongoing. You don't get away from IRD debts just by declaring bankrupt. They pursue you long after that. So that was probably the worst example, because there was no happy ending for her. I won't go into the detail, but it was a rough story, and we hear and see lots of similar stories where people think it's going to be so much better, but really what they're doing is they're just running massive risks.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like the responsibility for us as the business owner, if we want to build a team and we want to be risk averse, or if there are people that are making murmurings. I know in our community, owners have team members that are making those murmurs of, I really want to go out on my own. I think we need to be savvy enough to give, these potential team members going out on their own, give them the right story so they can make an educated decision, instead of going into fear mode and worrying about it, or well, screw you, off you go then, and actually doing them a favor by educating them into what would it actually look like, and would you actually financially be better off, because the answer is not always yes. And I also have seen a bit of a trend, not so much this year but last year, funnily enough, of people having gone out on their own and actually found it really lonely and quite boring, and actually want to come back into a team environment and just be around other people that care and carry the load. And like you said earlier, James, who else is going to do the marketing? Because actually I'm busy doing all the clients. I don't have time to do where do I find new clients, all of those things. Yeah. So
I think that's a huge factor.
Share the truth.
I mean that loneliness.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say that, Loris, you made a great point, is that the grass does look greener from the salon, and so people always make murmurings about going out on their own. And one of the things, my conversations with people who apply for jobs, and chatted to people who have their own home salons, is there's often a bit of confusion where stylists look at their weekly sales they're generating in a salon for their salon owner, and they confuse sales for profit. And they think that if I go out on my own, the sales that I'm generating is money in my bank that I can spend. And they often forget all the costs that the salon owner has to fork out for to generate those sales. You've got your lease, you've got your color costs, you've got all of these marketing costs. There's so many compliance costs and expenses that come out of that top line of sales before it goes into the bank each week. And there have been many people who've gone out on their own thinking that is all profit, and then they realize that it's not the full story. And not only that, a couple of the people I've talked to, when we work out their actual hourly rate, they forget that they have to spend a whole lot more time ordering stock and administrating appointments that clients are messaging them at all hours of the day. And if you actually take the amount of time they spend on their business divided by the profit, it's a very low hourly rate they're actually bringing in for themselves compared to what they're earning in a salon. I always encourage people to go and try it, right? If you want to try it, go and try it. But for a salon owner, I guess my advice would be never burn that bridge, because it's amazing how many people go and try it and then realize this isn't for me. And you've always got to have that door open to be able to
Yeah.
get them back. And once they've had that experience, they're often, even more part of the team culture, right?
Yeah, we've had so many people leave and then come back, and there's actually a familiar pattern, because there's this assumption that all my clients will follow me, but actually not all your clients are going to want to go to a home salon. It feels uncomfortable for a lot of people, and depending on how well set up the home salon is, people might, if they want to come once, they might not come again if they didn't feel like the environment was what they were expecting. And going into someone's house to get your hair done, it's not the same, as going to a hair salon on a high street. It's not the same experience. And what tends to happen is that a hairdresser's closest friends or their family are the ones that are most likely to come and see them at their home salon. And they might get a small number of clients that really, really like them, enough to overcome that barrier of going to their house. And but what happens is, however many actually do follow them, a clientele never stays static. It never stays the same. People always drop off, just through completely natural reasons. They might leave town. They might they might lose a job, not have as much money. They might not be that thrilled with the last haircut that they had. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but what the reality is that clienteles are always shrinking all the time. And that's why any successful business has to have a pipeline of new clients coming in, because you've always got to top up the ones that you're losing. And a home salon's no different. You're always going to lose some clients. And so you need a pipeline of new clients coming in. And one of the issues that home salons have is they don't have the visibility. They don't have the high street presence. They just don't get walk-ins. They don't attract as many new clients. And so what we see is that often a person might do okay for the first cycle, the first 6 to 8 weeks, and then a lot less will come back for the second time, and even fewer come back the third time. So typically, after about 6 months, a lot of these hairdressers come back. They either come back to us, or they go and find another salon to work, because they just see their revenue diminish, quite a lot over that period.
I've experienced this exact thing, James, actually, as team members leave, whether or not to work for themselves or even to go and work in another salon, usually by the second and third visit. So that's, 3 to 4 months. There is a significant number of those clients that initially follow the stylist actually come back, because it's all the other considerations, even if it's not a home salon, or if it's a suite or just another salon. The vibe was different, the parking was worse, they didn't have the coffee, and all of the other things. Like, it's not just about the stylist.
Yes.
There are too many other things about the brand presence. And I think for a smart business owner, all of those other touches that you consistently build as part of your brand package, your brand experience, strengthens your brand beyond just the operator. Like, we just can't afford to be operator driven and build a clientele for our team members. This is not the future of the industry. They have to be brand loyal clients for sure.
Yeah. Well, what we see at Vivo is that when a stylist leaves Vivo, this is something that we measure all the time, is how long does it take for those clients to come back to Vivo? And what we find is that over a 12-month period, 85% of clients will come back to Vivo. And they might have followed that stylist once or twice, but 85% come back, which always makes us think, well, that's not very many clients that actually stayed. And we don't know whether the 15% that didn't come back, we don't know whether they stayed with that stylist, because a lot of them might just have moved towns, or had changes in their own circumstances. So we don't know, but it's a very small number that do that. And whenever we survey clients as to what are the reasons why you come to Vivo, and it's always a bit humbling that the number one reason they come to Vivo is location. It's where the salon is. It's just we happen to be there, and they work. We're there and they work there, so it makes it's easy.
I think we forget that. Like we forget that because our ego wants us to think that it's our amazing service and our amazing team and it's amazing culture and all of the things. But actually, all those practical elements from a day-to-day environment, as long as the hair is good, right? Because you're probably surveying people that are like, okay, the hair is good, so the next other reason, like if the hair was bad, location doesn't matter.
I know. Just to be clear, there's lots of reasons why they come to Vivo, but out of all of them, location is the biggest percentage. It's the single biggest factor, and then you've got everything else.
Yes. Well, I was just about to say that you touched on a really important thing there, which is that it's about the work that as a salon owner you put in for your brand and for your team that makes a difference about whether people even consider leaving. And I think observation I have on the trend that we're seeing with people trying home salons is often when you talk to them, the fact that they don't feel like at their current situation they're either earning a fair amount but they're scared to know what that fair amount is, or they feel there's no flexibility, and that's what I guess is a big driver of people these days is they want to feel like there's flexibility, that they're not rigid in the structure that they're having to work in, and that's often why people are attracted to going out on their own. And really, salon owners can address that by being approachable and having conversations and realizing that we have to change our approach to what our team's rosters and life balance looks like.
I really wish that the software companies would give us this tool, because I reckon a good solution is that if you could have an 80% of somebody's roster, like let's face it, 35 hours a week is full time now. 40 hours is long gone. Even 38 is long gone. Like somewhere between 32 and 35 hours is considered full time. So if you could lock down and say, look, your core hours, 80% of your roster is these hours, because as a business, I need to know when you're going to turn up. I need to know when I'm going to market things available, and I know I need to manage white space. But you've got 20% flexibility to come and start late, finish early around these core hours. If you could give that, and the team member was able to manage their 20% of their roster and to say, I'm going to start at 11, not 10, or I'm going to start at 9, not 11, and just flex a little bit, I think that's enough. But so there needs to be a bit of a win for both. And I reckon that 80-20 rule is enough of that. Do you know what? I just want to sleep in this morning, or I want to go to the gym, or it's my mum's birthday. You need that, and not to have to ask. Like, that's a massive admin cost to hope. Like, Lyndon, can I start 2 hours later, please? It's like your time, it's their time. Yeah.
I 100% agree, and we try and overcome that through our management techniques. But the other part of that puzzle that has to be in place for that to work well is the remuneration structure for the employees has to be one in which they feel rewarded for coming in that extra hour. They know it's going to make a valuable impact to their take-home pay, or that they can make a good amount of money in that 80% of the time that covers their costs, and then everything else is their spending money. So and not every salon has that structure. There are still salons who are paying experienced stylists just above minimum wage, and and that's why stylists, I guess, are feeling trapped and desperate and needing to explore other options, because they're not this cost of living crisis. They don't know how else to make their bills.
Yeah, but you've got to have some sympathy for the salon owner who, if they don't have the money to pay, more than minimum wage, they don't have the money. And what that comes down to is the number of clients coming through the door, and a problem that a lot of these salons have, particularly over the last couple of years with the cost of living crisis and everything else that's been going on, is they just haven't been able to get enough clients coming through the door. You talk about flexibility for hairdressers. The number one factor that allows flexibility is having a really good clientele. If you've got a hairdresser who's got a great clientele, you can be as flexible as you like with them. And we've had some. There's one that springs to mind. She used to work just 3 days a week, really long days. She'd start at 7 a.m. and she'd work all the way through to 9 p.m. and she'd do that for 3 days, and then she'd have the next 4 days off. So. And should be in our top 10% of earners, in those 3 days, because she just packed client after client after client, worked her ass off in 3 days, and then had a 4-day weekend. So the lifestyle worked fantastically for her, but she could do that because she had built up a loyal clientele. And when you've got a loyal clientele, you can work whatever hours you want. And at Vivo, we've always had that view. If you've got a great clientele, work whenever you want. We'll work it out with you. But if you don't have a clientele, then you've actually got to work late nights. You've got to work Saturday. You've got to work those peak times that clients want you to be there. And when you've won enough of those clients that they're going to follow you and fit in with you, then you have the luxury of choosing whatever hours you want.
Hey, Larissa here. Are you loving this episode so far? I'm really glad that you're here, and thanks for joining me each week on the podcast. Now, super quick, I have a question for you. Have you ever found yourself wishing for a secret weapon that will boost your salon's revenue? It's kind of like trying to find your way through a maze sometimes. But guess what? I have a shortcut waiting just for you. Shortcuts, Salon Software, have shared with me a guide that contains 3 magic numbers that could totally flip the script for your salon. Knowing these numbers could help you find that missing piece to get your salon on the fast track to success. So if you're excited, get instant access to this white paper that reveals 3 crucial insights by clicking on the Tell Me How button in the show notes. Let's get back to the episode.
It's a simple principle. Eat your vegetables first and then have your dessert. Like, do the work the late nights, get the clients, woo the clients, build the clientele, and then reap the reward, and then you can do what you like.
That's right.
And if you don't want to work Saturdays and you've proven that you can, do the hours, the numbers, and the clients, don't work Saturdays. Clients will come when you're available. But if you're a brand new stylist, as an owner, we have to have the good leadership skills to be able to convey that. Work the Saturdays for a year and a half or however long. I'm not even going to put a time on it, but do the work, get the reward is the basic.
Yes. Yeah. Simple philosophy, right? But it's
right.
It's so true. And I guess as long as people know that if they do the work, they get the rewards, there's good motivation to start them on that process. But yeah, it's a simple fact. If you've got the clients, you call the shots.
Yep.
I think the challenge now for owners, to survive in 2024 and beyond is like, how do we collapse time and how do we make the journey from zero to hero faster? And so how can we lead our people to learn the skills, the soft skills, not just the technical skills, so we can have people in our industry achieve more quickly? Like, people are less patient. We're in an instant gratification world now. We have to adapt. And so the pressure is on us as business owners to be able to do that. My son just started a full-time barbering course. And in his first week, he was cutting with clippers, only on mannequins, but like straight away, day one, they were doing the thing that he came and was inspired to do. And so now he's inspired to engage, and he's fully engaged in the course. When I went to Polytech, my first couple of weeks, I sat at a desk and wrote freaking things about how the hair grew. I wasn't interested in how the hair grew. I just wanted to cut somebody's hair. So I think, we need to shift and we need to change, and we need to not complain about the generation that's in the talent pool right now. We need to adapt and go, how can I inspire these people and take them where they want to go because I need them in my workforce? I think that's the future.
Yeah, I think it's about having those really clear conversations with your team about what expectations are like and how the real world operates, so that they can have that understanding to know, if I do X, then Y happens, but I can't get Y until I've done X. That's really important. But you're right, everyone wants to do it fast these days.
So we've got to give them enough, like, yes, you have to work late nights and Saturdays, but I'm going to let you hold a pair of scissors and you're not saying that you necessarily do this, but like give them a little bit of something, otherwise the dessert's too far away and they don't have the patience to sit through. So
yeah, no, you're right. We have an academy in Tauranga, and now all of our students on day one pick up scissors, because we identified exactly what you said, that people come to hairdressing because they've been butchering Barbie dolls for years, and so we don't want them to wait 2 years before they can pick up their scissors and do the same. It's just too long. They have to be able to do the things that they want to do straight away, and that makes better students and better stylists, I think.
That was definitely my journey, just by the way. I cut the Barbie doll, even cut the dog's hair. My mum let me cut her hair, and then finally I was like, okay, you better go and do an apprenticeship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What hope do we hold for the industry, guys? Because I think, as long as I've been in the industry, which is a long time now, I can see that the challenge for small business owners is that unless we create good career pathways and we really tap into the talent that we're trying to employ, too quickly after, and I know you guys don't have so much of this problem now, but I can see it as an industry challenge. We lose people too quickly because the next, once I'm qualified, the next obvious career pathway for me is go and open my own salon. And so we're left with thousands of salons with small teams, 1, 2, and 3. And I think it's detrimental to the industry. And I think it's a responsibility for us to build pathways so we can build bigger salons. What are your thoughts and hopes for the industry moving forward?
I'll just say that we are certainly seeing a lot more small salons closing. We read about it, we hear about it, we see it in the areas that we have salons that that a lot of those smaller salons have closed. I think over the last couple of years, with sales going down and rents going up and other expenses going up, it's just become very hard for them. And I think that's probably good for the industry. Less salons and more larger salons. I think big salons are just better. You want to have 5 to 8 or 9 hairdressers working in a salon, because when you've got that sort of number, then you can afford to have apprentices, and when you've got apprentices, then you've got a sustainable industry, a sustainable business, and that's what we want. Is our vision for the industry is that it's sustainable, that there's the new generation coming through all the time, and that they're working in busy salons where they get exposure to their craft, where they get to see a variety of hairdressers using different techniques, and they can learn off people who've been there and done that. That's how the industry should operate. And when you've got a whole lot of really small salons that can't afford apprentices, then things begin to break down. And you could probably you could argue that the reason why there's a shortage of hairdressers right now is because we went away from that model. Too many small salons started, too many people tried working from home, I think also that there was a move to try and get more people going through academies instead of doing apprenticeships through salons. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the most effective way to train a hairdresser is as an apprentice through a salon. That is by far the best way. But you've got to have an industry that can actually support that model. And to support that model, you need big salons with multiple hairdressers. And the problem with all the small salons is they actually suck hairdressers away, and they suck clients away from those bigger salons. So less of the small ones, more of the big ones. I believe is the way forward for the industry.
I agree with you, and I love the sweet spot of 5 to 8, and I think below that, like 4 and below, actually is a harder business model. And I know a lot of business owners think that smaller is easier because there's less people to manage, but actually it's harder because you have one person leave or one person sick, then that's a quarter of your business if you're 4. It's a third of your business if you're 3. And so small everyday things become really hard to manage. One person sick just ruins the owner's whole week. They have to now work an extra 10 hours, all of the things. One person leaves, that's a third of your business. I think it's actually the harder business model to manage.
Absolutely, and we saw that. We saw that during COVID. We actually had a number of smaller, 2 or 3 person salons at the start of COVID, and they were the first to close. We basically couldn't handle it. If you've only got 3 people working, it's actually quite plausible for 3 of them to be sick at the same time, and then your salon's closed. So we actually made a conscious decision in 2020 that we would close down our small salons and that we would enlarge or relocate our salons so that we only had big ones, and we merged quite a few. So we've now ended up very consciously, very deliberately with larger salons, and it was purely because we realized that those small ones were not resilient enough to stand up when times were tough.
Yeah.
It is a very different challenge for salon owners, though. Like a small salon, like you said, they think it's easier to manage less people. When you have a larger salon, you do have to spend a lot more time thinking about salon culture, a lot more energy, ensuring that the team are working as a team and that the way that you operate, everyone's on the same page. There has to be a lot more clarity of expectation and work on culture. That is an important thing. But the payoff for doing that work is, it's that whole success breeds success, or the halo effect, right? People walk past a busy restaurant next to an empty restaurant, they all choose the busy restaurant because that's where everyone is. And that's the beauty of a 5 to 8 person salon. As people walk past, everyone's getting their haircut there, they want to be part of that. So it really does supercharge success.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Well, you guys being business owners for many years, many times over, what is a quote or a mantra or something that either you hold individually or maybe it's something that you kind of keep focused on together? What would you say that is?
Look, for me, I'm recently in the last year become a huge fan of the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a real thing for me, especially when we're managing our leadership team to try and implement culture across 80 plus salons. And one of my favorite quotes is that goals are good for setting direction, but systems are the best for making progress. So it's that idea that you really have to get into the nitty-gritty of how things are done and be intentional about how things are done in your salons to get the result that you want. Because if you're not intentional, things will happen that you don't intend. So yeah, that's my current favorite.
I love that.
Right. So one that I resonated with me fairly recently, and I've actually forgotten where I heard it from or who said it. Unfortunately, it's not a very good quote. But basically, it's just the principle of when things aren't going well, step back and look at what's happening, but be brutally honest. Because I think, and it's that phrase, that term, be brutally honest, which has really stuck with me, because I think there are times when you don't want to face up to the facts. You don't want to face up to the fact that a lot of your clients are pushing out appointments and some of them aren't coming at all, and your rent's going up and actually there's not enough money coming into the business to pay all the bills. And it's easier to ignore that than actually face the brutal reality of, okay, this is actually the situation. And during COVID, we had a lot of those moments where we had to be brutally honest, especially post-COVID, after the borders had been closed and there was that massive shortage of hairdressers. Pre-COVID, we had nearly 100 hairdressers on work visas, and then we had that whole period where no one was coming in, and so we were, it was a real struggle. Where do we get all those extra hairdressers from? And that was actually when we started the academy. We bought the academy and started, really making a big effort to, train more hairdressers. But that phrase, be brutally honest, you can't make good decisions for yourself or for your business unless you are really, really honest about where you are right now and what you need to do to change things.
Yeah, I love that, James. I would add to that, knowing your numbers really helps you be brutally honest, like the black and white facts, because it can get very grey when we just think about, relationships and people, and things get a little bit grey. So there's no hiding from the numbers. Yeah, I love that. All right, what about, we already mentioned a book, Lyndon. Is there any other book, podcast, or resource that you think like owners should get their hands on?
That's a good question. I think you should just read as widely as you can. Like, that's my passion, is just find information and tips and tricks from as many sources as you can. So you just have to have an open mind. So I don't have any specific places. It's really about trawling everything and taking the nuggets when you find them.
Yeah, I've been listening to a podcast called The Rest is History. Now, it's a podcast by two historians, and they just talk about all these, things that have happened in history. The Second World War, the founding of Constantinople, the Roman Empire, this, that. It's very varied, but it's fascinating. And I think I recommend it, not because it's got any particular insights for a hairdressing salon, but it's just fascinating to see how much history repeats. And so many of the things that we're living through today, it's actually happened before. That fake news, misinformation, conspiracy theorists. This stuff has been going on forever.
Plagues.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely right. And I think so often we think, wow, everything we're experiencing in the world today is unique to us, and it's not. This stuff just keeps happening. So I find it, not only do I find it really entertaining and interesting, but it also gives you amazing perspective, I think, just on the world as it is today, and helps to understand how a lot of what we see in the news or what we see on social media, a lot of it is human nature, and it just helps. I think it just helps to give a more balanced view of everything that happens today. Know your history. Yeah,
I love that. All right, that's a good recommendation. All right, I've appreciated this conversation around the direction of the industry and maybe what we can do to be part of the shift. I know people are going to want to stalk you and find you, like, who are these Vivo guys? So what is your dub and your socials?
Well, vivo.co.nz is our dub, and people can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Amazing.
same here.
All right. Thank you once again for joining me on the podcast. Appreciate you both.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's all coming together finally. If we work with our team to offer them flexibility, show them how to create a 100K career pathway, talk to them about business, well, then they stay. And when they stay, we're able to grow our teams, which means that we can bring in new apprentices, train up the next generation of rockstar stylists and therapists. So again, thank you, James. Thank you, Linda, for coming back on the Salon Owners Collective podcast yet again. I know when I was a salon owner, it can feel super hard and personal if somebody chooses to leave, especially if they go solo. But as we chatted about in this episode, sometimes people just think the grass is greener on the other side of the salon. So remember, talk with them about it so they can make an educated decision, not just a random one on whether going solo is really right for them. And remember, don't burn your bridges, because you never know when they come back. All right, that's a wrap from me. Ciao for now. Same time, same place next week. Ciao.